While her husband was deployed overseas fighting for his country, Jessica discovered he had a second family living just 3 towns away. Her revenge wasn't just sweet, it was perfectly legal and devastatingly complete. If you've ever wondered how far loyalty extends when honor is betrayed, hit subscribe now to hear Jessica's methodical takedown of the man who wore 2 wedding rings. I stood proudly beside my husband Michael at his deployment ceremony, the picture of military wife strength. At 32, I had the composed demeanor that came from years of practice, the forced smiles during long separations, the brave face during tearful goodbyes, and the silent resilience during lonely nights. For 8 years, I had supported his career, moved to 3 different bases, and managed our home during his 4 previous deployments. Our life wasn't perfect, but I believed in our partnership and the sacrifices we both made for his service to the country. The military base bustled with activity that morning. Families gathered in clusters, children clung to their uniformed parents, and spouses exchanged final embraces. The air was thick with a mixture of pride and apprehension, emotions I had grown all too familiar with over the years. "I'll call whenever I can," Michael promised as we said goodbye, his hands lingering on my shoulders. His blue eyes, the same ones that had captivated me at a friend's barbecue 9 years ago, held mine with intensity. "Take care of yourself. This year will fly by." I nodded bravely, fighting back tears. The familiar lump in my throat threatened to betray my composure. "Stay safe. We'll be waiting when you come home." What Michael didn't know was that we had recently become more complicated. 3 weeks before his deployment, I had discovered I was pregnant. After 6 years of trying, countless negative tests, 2 miscarriages, and 3 failed rounds of fertility treatments, this unexpected miracle had left me speechless. I had stared at the positive test for nearly an hour, afraid to believe it was real. I decided to wait until our final video call before he went dark to share the news, wanting to see his face when I told him. This baby felt like a promise, a new beginning after years of disappointment. It was also a beacon of hope during what would otherwise be a lonely year ahead. The morning after the deployment ceremony, I sat in our empty house, the silence deafening after the flurry of preparation in recent weeks. Michael's coffee mug still sat in the sink. His cologne lingered in our bedroom. The familiar ache of separation settled over me, but this time, I placed my hand over my still flat stomach and whispered, "At least I'm not completely alone." That evening, I called my sister, Kate. "How are you holding up?" Kate asked. "I'm okay," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I haven't told him about the baby yet." "Are you serious? Why not?" I sighed, twirling my wedding ring unconsciously. "You know how superstitious I've been after the miscarriages. I wanted to wait until I hit the 12-week mark, just to be safe. Plus, I want to tell him when we can really talk about it, not when he's rushing to pack and stressed about deployment." "That makes sense," Kate conceded. "When will you tell him?" "We have a video call scheduled next week." "I'll tell him then." But the video call never happened. Technical difficulties on Michael's end meant we had to settle for a brief, crackling phone call where I decided the news was too important to share over a connection that dropped every few seconds. "I'll wait until the next call," I told myself. "This news deserves a proper moment." The first 2 months of Michael's deployment passed with the expected difficulties. I battled morning sickness alone, clutching the toilet bowl at dawn while simultaneously checking my phone for messages from my husband. I attended my first prenatal appointment with my sister instead of my husband, fighting tears when the technician asked, "Is Dad deployed?" I began preparing our home for the baby, converting the spare room into a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow neutral, since we had decided to be surprised by the baby's gender. Though difficult, these challenges were expected parts of military life. What wasn't expected was the phone call that came on a Tuesday afternoon in October. I was reviewing case files for work. My job as a paralegal at a law firm specializing in military family matters had been a blessing, allowing me to work from home 3 days a week. The autumn sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as I sipped herbal tea, one hand absently resting on my now visible baby bump. When my phone rang, I answered without checking the caller ID, assuming it was a client. "Mrs. Matthews?" An unfamiliar woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, this is she." "I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm calling from Westview Elementary School. Your husband is listed as an emergency contact for Emily Matthews, but we haven't been able to reach him. Is he available?" My heart skipped a beat. The pen I had been holding clattered onto the kitchen table. I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. My husband doesn't have any children, and he's currently deployed overseas. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear papers shuffling and a muffled conversation in the background. I see, the woman finally said, her voice careful and measured. Emily's records list Michael Matthews as her father. He attended her parent-teacher conference just before his deployment in August. Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. My mind raced. Michael had been at a pre-deployment training weekend in August. I remember dropping him off at the base on Friday and picking him up on Sunday, exhausted and quieter than usual. Had he lied about where he was going? Could you tell me the address you have on file for Michael Matthews? I asked, striving to keep my voice neutral. The administrator hesitated. I'm not sure I should. Please, I interrupted. My husband is deployed with the 82nd Airborne. If someone is using his identity, the military would want to know. Reluctantly, the administrator provided an address in Havenbrook, a town just 20 minutes away. I wrote it down with a trembling hand, thanked the woman, and ended the call. For several minutes, I sat motionless at the kitchen table, staring at the address I'd written down. 1,000 explanations raced through my mind, each one more implausible than the last. Michael had no siblings who might share his name. He wasn't close to any cousins or relatives who might list him as an emergency contact. The simplest explanation was too painful to contemplate. This is crazy, I muttered, rising from the table. There has to be a reasonable explanation. With shaking hands, I opened my laptop and began what would become a 3-day investigation that would shatter my world. First, I searched property records for the address in Havenbrook. The house had been purchased 6 years ago by Michael J. Matthews, my husband's full name, including his middle initial. The mortgage documents listed his social security number, the same as my husband's. My stomach churned as I stared at the proof on my screen. Next, I searched social media. Michael had always been minimally active online, a detail he attributed to security concerns as a military member. But a quick search for Allison Matthews Havenbrook revealed a Facebook profile belonging to an attractive blonde woman with a bright smile. I clicked on the profile, and my world imploded. There, in photo after photo, was my husband, Michael Matthews, my partner of 9 years, my husband of 8, with another woman and a young girl. Family beach vacations, Christmas mornings, backyard barbecues. A life that paralleled my own, unfolding just 3 towns away. No, I whispered, my hand covering my mouth. No, no, no. But the evidence continued to mount. Michael Matthews, my husband of 8 years, had another wife named Allison and a 7-year-old daughter named Emily living just 3 towns away. For the past 7 years, almost the entirety of our marriage, Michael had been living a double life, alternating between 2 families, explaining his absences to each woman as military duties or training requirements. I dove deeper, fueled by a mixture of disbelief and rage. I accessed our joint bank accounts, scouring years of statements. I discovered transfers to an account I didn't recognize, regular deposits that coincided with our monthly budget discussions, where Michael always insisted on maintaining a military emergency fund. I found credit card statements showing jewelry purchases I had never received, a diamond bracelet bought for Valentine's Day the previous year, when I had received a modest necklace and dinner at our favorite restaurant. A second phone bill revealed thousands of texts to a number I didn't recognize, communication that must have happened on a phone I knew nothing about. Property records exposed not just the mortgage on the house in Havenbrook I'd never seen, but home insurance payments, utility bills, and property taxes, all paid from accounts linked to my husband. Most devastating of all was the Facebook page belonging to Allison Matthews, filled with family photos of Michael, Allison, and Emily, a parallel life that mirrored my own, down to the matching living room furniture. In the images, Michael beamed with pride beside his daughter at dance recitals and birthday parties, events that had supposedly been training weekends or mandatory briefings. I scrolled through years of memories that had been stolen from me, seeing a side of my husband I'd never known existed. In one particularly painful photo, Michael sat beside Emily at what appeared to be a father-daughter dance, the child wearing a tiara and Michael in a suit I had bought him for military functions. The timestamps on these photos revealed a meticulously orchestrated deception. The weekend Michael had claimed to be at training in North Carolina, he was actually at Emily's 7th birthday party. The 3-day conference in Virginia had coincided perfectly with a family trip to the beach. Every absence had a corresponding alibi, a perfectly crafted lie designed to maintain two separate lives. For 3 days, I barely ate or slept. I moved mechanically through our house, gathering evidence, building a case, and trying to process the unimaginable betrayal. I cycled through shock, devastation, rage, and grief. I screamed into pillows, sobbed in the shower, and stared blankly at walls. I considered calling Michael directly, imagined the satisfaction of hearing him stammer through explanations, but something held me back. A cold, calculating part of my brain advised patience. Confronting him now would give him time to prepare, to cover his tracks, to formulate excuses. On the 4th day, with my hand resting protectively over my growing baby bump, clarity emerged through my tears. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about my child. And I wasn't going down without a fight. I called in sick to work, then sat at my kitchen table with a fresh legal pad. At the top, I wrote in bold letters, the plan. What Michael had forgotten, or perhaps never fully appreciated, was that I wasn't just a devoted wife, I was a paralegal with connections throughout the military and legal communities. I had spent years working with military families on everything from divorce proceedings to benefit disputes. I knew the system intimately, and I wasn't about to let him destroy 2 families. My revenge wasn't swift or emotional. It was calculated, comprehensive, and completely legal. First, I documented everything meticulously. Every bank statement, every property record, every photograph became evidence of Michael's deliberate deception. I created spreadsheets tracking his movements over the past 3 years, correlating his alleged military obligations with his actual whereabouts. I printed email exchanges where he detailed training exercises that coincided perfectly with events in Emily's life. I compiled phone records showing patterns of communication that aligned with his schedule of absences. Next, I consulted quietly with a military family attorney, not at my own firm, where gossip might spread, but with an old law school friend who now practiced 2 counties away. Over coffee in a quiet cafe, I laid out the evidence and asked the question that had been haunting me: what are my options? The attorney, a veteran of both military service and family law, explained that Michael's actions constituted not just personal betrayal but fraud against the military. He had been collecting housing allowances for 2 separate households, a serious offense. Moreover, if he had legally married both women, he was guilty of bigamy, a criminal offense under both civilian and military law. The military takes these matters very seriously, the attorney explained, especially the financial fraud aspects. If you choose to report this, there will be consequences for his career. I nodded, absorbing this information. Good, I said finally. He deserves consequences. But before proceeding with any formal complaints, I knew there was one more crucial step. I needed to contact Allison. Not out of vindictiveness, but out of solidarity. The other woman was as much a victim as I was. Finding Allison's number wasn't difficult. I had already uncovered so much information that locating a phone number was trivial. What was difficult was gathering the courage to make the call. On a Wednesday afternoon, I sat in my car outside a coffee shop, far from both our neighborhoods, and dialed the number. My heart pounded as the phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello? A woman's voice answered. Friendly, unsuspecting. Is this Allison Matthews? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Yes, who's calling? I took a deep breath. My name is Jessica Matthews. I'm Michael's wife. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear Allison's breathing change, quicken, then pause altogether. I think, Allison finally said, her voice tight with emotion, that we need to talk. We agreed to meet at the coffee shop where I was parked. 30 minutes later, 2 women who should have been strangers but were intimately connected through the same man sat across from each other, sizing each other up with wary eyes. Allison was pretty in a girl-next-door way, blonde hair cut in a practical bob, minimal makeup, simple gold hoop earrings. I could see a plain gold wedding band that matched the one Michael had given me 8 years ago. My stomach twisted at the sight. So, she said after a long pause, I guess neither of us knew about the other. I shook my head. No. I just found out 3 days ago, when the school called. The school called you? She looked confused. Emily's school. They couldn't reach Michael because he's deployed, so they called me. Apparently, they had both our numbers listed for emergencies. I took a sip of my coffee to steady myself. Is Emily okay? The question seemed to surprise her. She's fine. She had a fever, but it wasn't serious. My mother picked her up. Allison studied me for a moment. You're pregnant. I instinctively placed a hand over my baby bump. Yes. About 4 months. Does he know? No. I was going to tell him after he deployed, but we never had a good connection for a video call. I laughed bitterly. Now I understand why he was always having technical difficulties when he was supposed to call. He was probably with you. The conversation was surprisingly civil, filled with tears from both of us as we compared notes and realized the extent of Michael's deception. We laid our phones on the table between us, scrolling through text messages, comparing timelines, and filling in the gaps in each other's knowledge of our shared husband. He told me he was at officer training that weekend, Allison said, pointing to a photo of Michael at my cousin's wedding. And he told me he had field exercises when he was actually at Emily's dance recital, I replied, showing Allison the military schedule Michael had forwarded to me. As the afternoon wore on, our initial wariness gave way to something unexpected, a sense of solidarity. We weren't rivals. We were both victims of the same elaborate con. How long have you been married? I asked. 7 years in March, Allison replied. You? 8 years in June. We looked at each other, the math settling between us. He had married Allison less than a year after marrying me. While I had been planning our first anniversary celebration, Michael had been planning a wedding with another woman. Did you ever suspect anything? Allison asked. I shook my head. Never. His schedule was always so unpredictable with the military. When he was gone, I assumed he was where he said he was. Same, Allison admitted. The military was the perfect cover. Question his whereabouts, and you're questioning his service. What kind of wife does that? By the end of our meeting, we were both emotionally exhausted but united in purpose. Allison, too, was devastated by Michael's betrayal, but agreed that he needed to face consequences for his actions. We exchanged contact information and promised to coordinate our next steps. He's deployed right now, I explained, which gives us time to prepare. What exactly are you thinking? Allison asked, her eyes revealing a mixture of pain and determination. I'm thinking, I said slowly, that we make sure he loses everything. Over the next few weeks, Allison and I spoke daily, building both a case and, unexpectedly, a friendship. I found myself admiring her resilience and her fierce protection of Emily. She was smart, too, a third-grade teacher with an eye for detail that proved invaluable as we built our case. I found something, she told me one evening, her voice excited through the phone. Remember how Michael always did the taxes because he said it was complicated with his military benefits? Yes, I said, feeling a familiar twist of anger. He had told me the same thing. Well, I got curious and requested copies of our returns from the IRS. Guess what? He's been claiming Emily as a dependent on both sets of tax returns. That's tax fraud. I smiled grimly. Add it to the list. Together, we compiled our evidence and prepared formal complaints to Michael's commanding officer and the military inspector general. The package we sent was comprehensive. Financial records proving the dual housing allowances, property documents showing 2 separate family homes, tax returns showing duplicate dependent claims, and statements from both of us detailing the elaborate deception. Bigamy was not just a moral failing, it was a crime under military law, a violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. But I didn't stop there. With my knowledge of military family law, I knew that timing was crucial. I liquidated our joint accounts, legally entitled to me as his spouse, and used the funds to secure a new apartment and hire the best divorce attorney in the state. I filed for divorce on grounds of adultery, ensuring that the documentation was waiting for Michael when he returned from deployment. Meanwhile, Allison, guided by my expertise, followed similar steps. She secured her own legal counsel, documented all assets, and prepared for the inevitable confrontation. We coordinated our legal strategies to ensure that Michael couldn't play us against each other, couldn't claim that one relationship was the real marriage while the other was a misunderstanding. When Michael's commanding officer received the evidence packet, the response was swift. Michael was immediately recalled from deployment, an unusual step that signaled the seriousness with which the military was taking the allegations. He returned not to a hero's welcome, but to military police waiting at the airport. His confused texts began almost immediately. What's going on? I just got pulled from my unit. They're sending me home. Did something happen to you? To the house. I didn't respond. An hour later, baby please. They're saying something about an investigation. I don't understand what's happening. I watched the messages roll in, feeling surprisingly little emotion. It was like watching a stranger plead his case. The man I thought I knew had never existed. Allison texted me screenshots of his messages to her, nearly identical pleas of confusion and concern. We had agreed not to engage, to let him face the consequences without warning or preparation, just as we had been blindsided by his betrayal. 2 days after his return, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Jessica, it's me. Please don't hang up. Michael's voice sounded desperate. I can explain everything. I'm sure you can, I replied coolly. You've had plenty of practice explaining things. This is all a huge misunderstanding. I don't know what you think you know, but save it for the court-martial, I interrupted. And for the divorce proceedings. And for your daughter Emily when she's old enough to understand why her father isn't around anymore. I'm sure you'll come up with something creative. Emily? What are you talking about? How do you? He paused, and I could almost hear the realization dawning. Oh God. Yes, I said. Oh God indeed. Allison and I have become quite close, thanks to you. It's amazing how much we have in common. He was silent for a long moment. I never meant to hurt either of you. The audacity of his statement triggered the first real anger I'd felt in days. You married 2 women. You maintained 2 households, 2 lives, for 7 years. You lied every single day. You didn't just hurt us, Michael. You built your entire life on hurting us. I love you both, he whispered. I know that sounds impossible, but it doesn't sound impossible, I cut in. It sounds pathological. And it's over now. All of it. I hung up, blocked his number, and never spoke to him directly again. All further communication happened through attorneys or military officials. The court-martial that followed was swift and decisive. With 2 wives providing testimony and mountains of documentary evidence, Michael had little defense. His attorney attempted to claim that he believed his first marriage to me had been legally dissolved, but financial records showing his continued support of both households demolished this argument. I sat in the military courtroom, my pregnancy now visible to everyone, and watched as the man I had loved for 9 years was stripped of his rank, his benefits, and his honor. His face, once so familiar to me, now seemed like a stranger's. He couldn't meet my eyes or Allison's as the verdict was read. Michael was dishonorably discharged, losing all military benefits, his pension, and his reputation. The charge of defrauding the government through duplicate housing allowances resulted in a fine that decimated his savings. His security clearance was revoked, making future employment in his field nearly impossible. The tax fraud investigation was still ongoing, with potential criminal charges to follow. In the divorce settlement, I was awarded our home, full financial compensation, and alimony to support me and our child. The military's investigation into the fraudulent housing allowances resulted in Michael being ordered to repay years of duplicate benefits, a financial burden that would follow him for decades. Allison, too, filed for divorce and full custody of Emily, which was granted without contest. The judge was particularly sympathetic to the impact of Michael's deception on his daughter, who had to cope not only with her father's absence but with the knowledge that her entire family structure had been built on lies. Michael Matthews, once respected in 2 communities, was left with nothing but the consequences of his choices. The man who had carefully constructed 2 separate lives now had none. Throughout this process, something unexpected happened. Allison and I, brought together by betrayal, developed a genuine bond. We supported each other through court appearances, shared resources, and helped each other navigate the emotional fallout of Michael's deception. We should hate each other, Allison remarked one day after a particularly grueling legal meeting. That would be giving him too much power, I replied. He already took enough from both of us. As my due date approached, Allison helped me prepare the nursery. We had sold the house that Michael and I had shared, too many memories, and I had purchased a smaller home closer to the center of town. As we assembled the crib together, I found myself watching Allison with curiosity. What was it like? I asked suddenly. When Emily was born? Allison smiled, her eyes distant with memory. It was the most terrifying, beautiful day of my life. I was in labor for 19 hours. Michael was there, holding my hand the whole time. Her smile faltered. At least he gave me that. Did you ever wonder where he told me he was during those 19 hours? She looked up, surprised. I never thought about it. He said he was on a 3-day training exercise. No phone access. When he finally called, he sounded exhausted. Said they'd been doing night maneuvers with no sleep. I shook my head, marveling at his audacity. He was describing being up all night with you and Emily. Instead of anger, we both found ourselves laughing at the absurdity of it all. The laughter felt healing, like finally letting go of something toxic we'd been carrying. 2 weeks later, at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in June, my water broke. I called Allison instead of an ambulance. She arrived in 20 minutes, helped me into her car, and drove me to the hospital. She stayed with me through 12 hours of labor, holding my hand, wiping my forehead, telling me I could do this. When they placed my daughter in my arms, I looked up at Allison with tears streaming down my face. "Thank you," I whispered. "I couldn't have done this without you." She squeezed my shoulder. "That's what family is for." I named my daughter Sophie Hope Matthews. She had my dark hair and, to my initial dismay, Michael's blue eyes. But as the weeks passed, I began to see those eyes as hers alone, not a reminder of her father. Life settled into a new normal. I returned to work part-time, with Allison often watching Sophie when I had to be in the office. Emily, now 8, became a doting big sister, proud of her role in Sophie's life. We never hid the truth from her, that she and Sophie shared the same father, but we framed it in age-appropriate terms about families coming in many forms. 6 months after Sophie's birth, I received a letter from Allison with a photo of Emily holding her dance trophy. The note was simple: different lives, same strength. Thank you for giving Emily her truth, even when it was painful. Some men don't deserve the women who love them. P.S. Emily would love to meet her half-sister someday. I placed the photo on my refrigerator, a reminder that sometimes the perfect revenge isn't about destruction. It's about reclaiming your power and rebuilding with truth as your foundation. A year later, on a sunny Saturday in the park, 2 single mothers watched their daughters play. 8-year-old Emily pushed 1-year-old Sophie on the baby swing, both girls laughing in the afternoon sunlight. Allison and I sat on a nearby bench, sharing coffee and updates on our lives. "I heard he's working construction in Arizona now," Allison said, not looking up from her coffee. I shrugged. "I don't track him anymore. That's the court's job." Allison nodded. "Emily asked about him last week. I showed her the photo album you helped me put together, all the real memories, not the fake story." "How did she take it?" "Better than expected. She said she's glad to have a sister, even if her dad turned out to be the bad guy in our story." I watched the girls playing, half-sisters with the same smile, unaware of the unusual circumstances that had brought them together. In the distance, a military helicopter flew over the base, a reminder of the life I had once embraced. But here, in this moment, was something more authentic than anything Michael had ever given me. A chosen family, built on honesty rather than deception. "You know," I said, "sometimes I almost want to thank him. If he hadn't been such a complete disaster of a human being, we wouldn't be here now." Allison laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound. Maybe that's the real revenge, finding happiness he can never touch. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the playground, we gathered our daughters and headed to Allison's house for dinner. Our lives, once parallel lines running alongside each other in secret, had now intersected to form something new and unexpected. A family forged not by traditional bonds, but by resilience, truth, and the unexpected solidarity that can emerge from shared pain. And somewhere in Arizona, Michael Matthews might have wondered what became of the 2 families he had abandoned. But Allison and I no longer spared him a thought. We were too busy building lives that no longer revolved around his lies. 2 years after Michael's dishonorable discharge, I received a call from a military investigator I had worked with during the case. He informed me that Michael had applied for a review of his discharge status, claiming he had been suffering from undiagnosed PTSD that had caused his irrational behavior. "What do you need from me?" I asked, my voice steady. "Nothing, actually. I just thought you should know that his appeal was denied. The review board found his claims unsubstantiated and, frankly, offensive to veterans who actually struggle with PTSD." After I hung up, I sat for a long time, wondering why the news didn't bring me more satisfaction. I realized that Michael's continued attempts to escape accountability no longer angered me. They just confirmed that I had made the right choice in cutting him out of our lives completely. That evening, as I tucked Sophie into bed, now a chattering 3-year-old with boundless energy, she asked the question I had been preparing for. "Mommy, why don't I have a daddy like Emma does?" I sat on the edge of her bed, choosing my words carefully. Families come in all different shapes, sweetheart. Some have a mommy and a daddy. Some have 2 mommies or 2 daddies. Some, like ours, have one mommy who loves you enough for 2 parents. She seemed to consider this. "And Auntie Allison and Emily? Are they our family too?" "Yes," I said, smiling at her perception. "They're our chosen family. And that's the very best kind. Because we picked them?" Sophie asked, her blue eyes serious. "Exactly. We picked each other." As I closed her bedroom door, I thought about how children often understand the essence of things better than adults. Sophie was right. Allison, Emily, Sophie and I had chosen each other. Out of the wreckage of Michael's deception, we had salvaged something genuine and valuable. 5 years after Michael's departure from our lives, I stood in the audience at Emily's middle school graduation. Now 13, she had blossomed into a confident young woman with a talent for mathematics and a wicked sense of humor. Sophie, 6 and starting 1st grade in the fall, watched her big sister with undisguised adoration. After the ceremony, as we celebrated at a local restaurant, Emily pulled me aside. "Jess, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, still touched whenever she used my name instead of Aunt Jessica. "Do you think I'm like him?" Her voice was small, vulnerable in a way I rarely heard anymore. I took her hands in mine. "Emily, listen to me. You are nothing like him. You are honest and brave and kind. Those are qualities you got from your mother, and from yourself. The only thing you got from him is half your DNA, and frankly, you've done amazing things with it." She smiled, relief visible in her eyes. "Sophie looks like him sometimes. When she smiles a certain way." "I know," I admitted, "but it doesn't bother me anymore. She's her own person, just like you are." Emily nodded. "Mom said you're dating someone. Is that true?" I felt a blush creep up my neck. "Your mom has a big mouth. Is he nice? Does Sophie like him?" "Yes to both questions. His name is Daniel. He's a history professor. And before you ask, because I know you will, yes, I've done a very thorough background check on him." I winked at her. "No secret families." Emily laughed. "Good. We have enough family already." As we rejoined the celebration, I caught Allison's eye across the table. She raised an eyebrow questioningly, and I nodded. Emily was okay. We were all okay. Later that night, as I drove home with a sleeping Sophie in the back seat, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The pain of Michael's betrayal had long since faded, replaced by gratitude for the unlikely family it had created. I had stopped defining myself as a betrayed wife, a single mother, or even a woman who had executed the perfect revenge. Now I was simply Jessica, mother to Sophie, chosen family to Allison and Emily, paralegal specializing in military family law, and most recently, partner to Daniel, a kind man who understood my past without being intimidated by it. The perfect revenge, I had discovered, wasn't about making Michael suffer. It was about creating a life so full and authentic that his absence became irrelevant. It was about transforming betrayal into blessing, deception into truth, and parallel lives into intersecting ones. And as I pulled into my driveway, with Sophie sleeping peacefully behind me and the porch light illuminating the home we had built together, I knew that this imperfect, unexpected, chosen family, was the sweetest revenge of all. If this story of betrayal and justice resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe for more tales of perfect revenge. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever discovered a devastating secret that changed everything? And remember, sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply living well.